siehst du Stream rein. Weiß nicht. bonito, oder?
everyone. It's absolutely amazing to see all of you in this theater tonight. Welcome to Fuckup Night. My name is Cherry. I'm the VP of Events for ETH Entrepreneur Club, and it is my honor to be joined on stage by Gregory, the president of the club, as well as the members of the ETH Entrepreneur Club.
It is very exciting to be here tonight with 1,500 guests, with all of you. So we are the ETH Entrepreneur Club. We're a student association, and we have the mission to foster entrepreneurship and empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. We challenge students to explore entrepreneurship. We challenge students to take risks, and we also challenge students to fail and not be afraid. Over the year, we organize more than 30 events. One of them is the Fuckup Night. And we always try to inspire, we try to educate, but also accelerate when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I know I've just said, like, our main target group are students, we organize the events for students, but it's very important that there are also people with a non-student background who are like already graduated or have a totally different career path. So I know there are more people here than just students, and that's really amazing because it's always great to have some diversity and different perspectives. So also thanks a lot for all the non-students who are here tonight. So I would like to point out one event in particular we organize besides the Fuckup Night. It's called the InCube. Why? Because the InCube is a very special event that shows very well what we do and why we do it, and that we do it always a bit crazy, a bit different. And you see the cube, that's one of the cubes we had last year. We organized the first edition last year in Zurich. We had 3 of them, 3 cubes, one at the Paradeplatz, one at the ETH Polyterrasse, and one just next to the main station. And in each cube we had 5 students. 5 students working in there, living in there, eating and even sleeping in there, just solving problems in there for 4 days straight. And here's some impressions. So I'm very happy to announce that we will open up applications for 2018 tonight. So if you're now excited about this project and you want to join, you can apply under eth.ec/incube. And also I'm very excited to share with you the cities, the locations for 2018. We'll be again with 3 cubes in Zurich, and we're going to have a cube in St. Gallen, one in Bern, one in Lausanne, and the very first cube abroad at the MIT in Boston. So 7 cubes in total. Next, I would like to ask you all for a favor. I would like to ask you to help us share the message of the Fuckup Night, share the message of failures. So if you all are very active tonight, help us post and share all the lessons we learned from our speakers. That will have a huge effect to also spread this thought of the Fuckup Night. And of course, if you're excited about our activities and in general want to stay tuned, also feel free to follow our channels on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. As a very last point from my side, I would like to thank our entire team for being here and also making this event happen. And I would like to thank one person in particular, one person who really made this all possible, one person who was running around for the last month, and I was deeply impressed by this person, how she made it possible, pulled everything together, how she communicated, and also today kind of executed on everything. And please, I would like to ask you for a huge applause for Cherry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Greg. Now let's get back to talking about Fuckup Night. So Fuckup Night is a global movement to share stories of professional failures. So tonight I invite you to learn from failure, to embrace failure, and to share stories of failure. After the evening, we invite you for a drink on us, so that you can meet each other and perhaps share your own fuck-up stories with each other. This event is the biggest event that we've ever put on as a club. Thanks to all of these sponsors, this event is also completely free. And that's amazing because anyone who wants to join us can attend for free. And finally, for the audience questions, tonight, throughout the evening, we're going to be collecting your questions for the speakers on Twitter under the hashtag Fuckup Zurich. At the end of the event, we'll have a speaker Q&A. And so we invite you to submit your audience questions. We have an amazing lineup of speakers tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the true heroes of this evening for their bravery in sharing their personal, raw stories. And with that, I'd like to welcome onto stage our moderator for the evening, Fabian Unteregger.
Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to the world's biggest fuck-up night, and I'm humbled and I'm amazed. And I must say, the ETH Entrepreneur Club, they today did not fuck up. It's amazing that the Theater Elf is packed with people, and I must say, in here today, we have more people than the Grasshopper Football Club had during the entire season. Isn't that amazing? And I ask you, how are you doing? Okay, no, we do that one more time. How are you doing? That sounds a little better. Now, as you've seen, we have 4 brilliant speakers, all of which will be talking for 15 minutes. And if they will speak any longer, we become very, very unpleasant. So they stick to their time limits. So, yes, there we go. And what is there to say? Every one of us has his or her fuck-ups on the way. For instance, my first fuck-up happened when I was given birth. Yes, so, I'm sorry about it. I was given birth, so I popped out and there, oh no. So, you get surprised, and shortly after, when I was a boy, I cycled around our quarter, and as you know, cycling can eventually become a bit boring, and we lived in a very quiet quarter, so I decided to, okay, why not try to cycle with closed eyes? I did not take into account that there are parked cars. So obviously, I bumped into a car, and it didn't help that a friend of my parents sat in there. I was put on a raw vegetable diet the week to follow. A very unpleasant experience. So after I wanted to become a fighter pilot, so you apply at the sort of the fighter school, and they invite you for a test, and you go through that questionnaire, and it takes about 2 hours, and 5 minutes before finishing, I realized, oh, there is a back page with questions as well. Failing big time. Then somehow I went to the ETH, and Lino Gutzeller beforehand told me, please Fabian, if you do me one favor, it's this, don't ever say ETH. It's ETH. So I'm doing this favor. I went to ETH and we had chemistry lab, and we were following instructions what to do, and obviously we had to write a report. And I thought, okay, those guys explained how to do the exam, how to do the experiment. Well, it must be boring for them to read what they have written anyway. So I embellished my report a great deal, and the assistant approached me later and said, "This is not how we write a report. A report is not supposed to be funny. Do you understand?" I learned a lot that day, I must tell you. And then suddenly I decided why not studying medicine. And when my parents learned about my plans to apply for medicine, they were one step away from delivering me to a psychiatrist. Our son is not, he wants to go for medicine, I don't understand the word. And I was trying to finance that by doing comedy, and we were trying to play these company shows, because back at the day no one was interested in what I was doing, so we had to do company shows. And at my second company show near Basel, I was 5 minutes into my stand-up set. The boss of the company stood up, grabbed the glass and the spoon, made bing, 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 bing. "I think we're gonna eat dessert now." He didn't tell me that half of the audience was from Germany and the other half from France. Failing big time again. And one of my disadvantages is I look a bit younger than I am. So I'm 41 now. The others now say, okay, what an asshole. But it's not just funny. For instance, when I go to a butchery and I buy 4 steaks, I'm being given 4 steaks, but they always ask me, would you fancy a little piece of sausage? Or for instance, when I try to buy furniture at IKEA, just when I go over the step of IKEA, someone from IKEA approaches me and puts me right into that ball pool. And there I stay, which is followed by an intercom saying, Mrs. Unterreger, please pick up your son at the ball pool. Not too pleasant, I have to say. And I think a lot of miscommunication starts because we don't know what we have to say. Communications starts, so it's difficult. So for instance, if I call someone in Geneva and speak French, they automatically switch into English. Maybe something about my French. Or as the expats, do we have expats here? Yes. Who flew more than 1,000 kilometers to be here? Just one, there we go. So we are a very international crowd this evening. I think Swiss German must be an enigma to a lot of people. So it's like, because we are a very small language, we created Swiss German to be able to communicate in a way no one other understands. So Swiss German to us is sort of what the NSA is to the Americans. It's our secret code we can stick to. And I oftentimes hear, well, Switzerland is very hard. I mean, socially, it's very hard to make friends here. I'd say, not at all, it's easy. You can either pay cash or credit card. Yes, that is it. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the first of our 4 keynoters. She is one of the most influential European women in tech. She holds a bachelor degree in French language and European history. And she was a CTO, a Chief Tech Officer for Cisco. And those who don't know what Cisco is and go like, okay, Cisco, how does it work? Because that's an American rapper. Cisco is a networking company as well, so it's... Oh yes, there we go. And before we come to our first speaker, there is wonderful Jerry telling me there's a little surprise. And the surprise is, we had someone doing a little movie for us, and it's someone I try to describe. We don't always get what he is trying to tell us. It's not very easy to understand. But today he went all the way, and I just say we are very pleased to introduce and go action.
Guten Abend, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. Guten Abend, liebe Mitglieder vom Entrepreneurs Club von der ETH. Ich freue mich an der Fuckup Night ein paar Worte zu euch zu sagen. Das Unternehmertum ist ganz entscheidend für jeden Erfolg und für jede stabile Gesellschaft. Je erfolgreicher die Unternehmungen sind, je innovativer die Unternehmungen sind, umso besser gelingt es, Job anzubieten und Vollbeschäftigung sicherzustellen. Und je vollbeschäftigter wir sind in einer Gesellschaft, in einem Land, umso stabiler das Land und umso attraktiver das Land für die Investitionen. Ihr wisst, ich komme aus dem Unternehmertum. Und ihr wisst, im Unternehmertum hat auch der Schneider-Ammann nicht immer Glück gehabt, so wenig wie in der Politik, notabene. Im Unternehmertum habe ich insgesamt etwa 10 Mal einen Start-up-Versuch unternommen. In der Regel eben leider im Ausland, in Kalifornien insbesondere, in San Diego. Und das, was mir am nachhaltigsten eingefahren ist, war, als ich eine Bilanz deponieren musste, weil wir gesagt haben, das hätte keinen Sinn, da wir wirklich nur noch Geld verlochen, das muss ein Ende finden, da haben wir die Bilanz deponiert. Und nach der Bilanzdeponierung bin ich 2 Tage später in den Rotary Club gegangen, und im Rotary Club bin ich richtig als Friend und als Family Member in Empfang genommen worden und gefeiert worden. Also man muss nicht dann einmal auf die Schnurrigkeit sein, auf gut Berndeutsch, dann ist man dabei. Hier bei uns ist es ein bisschen anders. Wir kennen eine Kultur, wo der Fehler nicht ohne weiteres zulässt. Wir müssen auf Anhieb erfolgreich sein. Wer an die Wand gefahren ist, der ist mehr oder weniger gezeichnet für seine ganze Zukunft. Und das muss geändert werden. Man muss Risiken nehmen, man muss mit diesen Risiken anputschen und unter Umständen sogar müssen kapitulieren. Und da ist man immer noch ein Unternehmer und ist immer noch jemand, der etwas gewagt hat. Und das ist outstanding und das ist zu unterstützen. Wenn wir den Rahmen gut abstecken, grosszügig abstecken, Risiken eingehen, dass die Unternehmerschaft ihrerseits Risiken eingeht, dass wir auf diesem Weg den Zirkel von der Entwicklung in die richtige Richtung, nämlich nach oben, mitgestalten. Ich hoffe, ihr habt heute oben eine ganz interessante, spannende Auseinandersetzung. Ich freue mich zu wissen, dass mehr als 1000 unternehmerische Seelen hier in diesem Raum sitzen und sich jeder Einzelne in irgendeiner Form mit der Zukunft und mit dem Risiko, mit der Innovation und mit dem Erfolg auseinandersetzen. Ich wünsche euch den Erfolg und ich danke euch herzlich für euer Engagement. Toi, toi, toi.
Wow! I must say I didn't get the word because he was just speaking too quickly. Now, we already started the introduction prior to me fucking up. Now, our first speaker is Monique Moreau. She used to be one of the chief technology officers for Cisco, and now she is here, and very glad to have her here. Please give a big round of applause for Mrs. Monique Moreau!
All right. It is so cool to be here this evening, and I can't say enough great words about the ETH Entrepreneur Club. and also our great moderator for this evening. Now, there are a couple things I'm certain of that I have certainties about. That is, we're going to all die. Yeah. And we're going to experience a lot of obstacles our way. If you don't believe that, then you're some kind of God I've never heard of, or you've never come out. So that's one thing that I am very, very certain about. The third is that we're going to have multiple micro-careers. Multiple. And it's really about what happens along the way, something that you never planned, something that was completely randomized, whatever, hits you. And so this is a bit of my journey about what that looks like. So that's me. Isn't she cute? Oldest of 5 children, happy family. I probably looked like my father with the bald hair, and they couldn't tell if I was a boy or a girl. And I was destined to be successful. I was the valedictorian of my class. I had all kinds of rewards and awards. You can name them, I had them. And in fact, I was voted most likely to succeed. Keep that in mind. Most likely to succeed by my classmates. But somehow, when you think about all of this, you have to also look at the fact that we become infected by something. And the infection that we become, which we are not immunized against, is around failure and obstacles. Because we think, that's what I thought, my career is going to be this linear success factor. Now think about it. Think about it for one moment. I go off, and what did you hear from Fabian? You heard that I came out with a degree in French and geography. How is it so that you become a chief technology officer? How is that so, ladies and gentlemen? That's because I was an accidental engineer. That is because I ended up in Silicon Valley with this degree, knowing nothing what I can do about it. And somehow, with some level of serendipity, I was able to get into a semiconductor company and learn a lot about something called networking. Think about that, this whole notion of networking, and somebody said, hey, you can do it. So yeah, I did do it. Now, what happens along the way, I get really, really cool and really excited about this. I decide it's Silicon Valley days, the internet is coming up. There's this really cool company that I really have been watching along the way. I'm very afraid to join it, you know. But I've been watching this company. We'll talk about that. I'll name it in a minute. But I decide, in the middle of Silicon Valley, if you can picture yourself along with me, what that looked like in the late 80s and early 90s, I decide to take a one-way ticket to a place called Switzerland. And it was really interesting because I was actually hired to be a network engineer, the accidental engineer along the way. And so I land in Switzerland, and we're in Bern, this happy, campy town, and learned a little bit about Swiss German. You know, wir go ganz legal. That's slaughter, aber viel langsam. And so I ended up in Swiss companies, and I loved it. My plan was to go back to Silicon Valley after 5 years. Forget plans. This is one thing you're going to learn very quickly. Plans don't work out so quickly. Either you're going to love it, fall in love with somebody, something happens along the way. Think about serendipity and randomness. Worked for Ascom Hosler, worked for this great company called Swisscom. And internet days, internet boom. In fact, we were all called in the room. I was working on some really physics-like problem called Mass 99. You know, it's like really heavy. And it was one project that people said, don't touch it, it will end your career. It will end your career if you touch it. And at the time, if you can imagine, for those who were at that time, people were leaving companies to start their own company. They were. And we were all called in a room very much like this to say, by people who were at Swisscom, please don't leave the company. Please stay with us. So we ended up doing that, and the rest started my path. And I ended up leaving the company because I thought I wanted to do something more interesting. And so it was the internet days, and what does Monique do? She ends up joining this company in 2000. Uh-oh, something's about ready to fuck up pretty fast. And that is, I joined in October of 2000, you can count it, 86% of its value was lost. And I was like in free fall. In fact, I came from a very high position to free fall. My options were underwater, and my entire organization was laid off. Now, you need to understand what that feels like when your entire organization is called under the water and you are in a room where people are saying goodbye to each other, and some are crying, and managers are saying, I was not hired to do this. And I survived. I survived, but it was an awful thing because it was around 8,000, 10,000 people losing their jobs that day. That day. And that was a really growth moment for me because you need to know how raw that is. You're ashamed. You have existenzangst because at least you survived something, but you don't know when the next axe is going to come. And I remember somebody in Silicon Valley telling me, we have no problem getting talent. We just, we just take them in, chew them up, and spit them out. It's exactly what I was told. But I said, okay, find something here that's going to carry you further. Find something in your gut that's going to carry you further. Yell out the door, it's not you. And so, one of the things I really learned is that stuff does happen. And if people tell you it's not personal, they're lying. It's very personal. It's extremely personal. The other thing is, it's ambiguous situations that we will always have. With an engineering mind that I learned how to craft fairly quickly, you're going to always have ambiguous situations. Should I stayed at Swisscom? No. I would not have met beautiful people who are here today, beautiful friends. The other thing is, it's not about you being the victim. Don't put yourself in that place. It's stuff that just happens. And the one important thing that I've learned is that you're not going to have a job in a company for life. Those days are over. Those days about going in and retiring from a company, we used to always say that, I'm going to retire from this company. It doesn't exist anymore. And it's what you're learning right now is the fact that it's like a club. They choose you, you choose them. And maybe you do some very incredible super work along the way, and great shit happens along the way, epic work. But along the way, you need to think about your own path and finding it here, really here, to continue. Because obstacles do happen. Stuff is thrown your way. Think about this moment, what it was like for me. Was I going to be allowed to remain in Switzerland? Right? Was I going to be shipped off to the next plane out the door? And so there was all kinds of moments that were happening. In fact, I think the song that should have been playing was Free Falling. Tom Petty, Free Falling. And it was really free falling. But you guys have a game. We have a game called the Joker. Right? And this is the power of networking. You're in a room right now with a bunch of people you probably know who's sitting next to you. But I challenge you to make acquaintance of those people you don't know. And at the time, because the only way I was going to survive in this particular company was to they wanted me to go pull cables. And I thought, that's not going to be the best use of me. So I did call the Joker, and I did call in some people who were in the company, and they formed what was called the future CTO group of the company, right? And I was able to spend 16 wonderful years there. And that was a really, really immense learning that I had. It was really, really cool. So the lesson here is contacts mean everything. Networking means everything. It really does. Finding it here, finding it also around you. So the magic doesn't happen where you're comfortable. The magic happens when you're not comfortable. The magic happens when you take that one-way ticket out of your country. The magic happens when you actually take the damn risk. And what kind of people do you want to surround yourself with? The people who stood, who fell down and picked themselves up. The difference between us, who are sharing the stage today, and the people who are welcomed, welcoming you at the airport or have some kind of watch endorsement or a sports hero, is that it was persistence. It's persistence. And these are the wonderful things that we need to think about, is when you fail an exam, when you fail your business, we celebrate it. We celebrate it. And those are the types of interview questions we need to be asking ourselves. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the magic happens. That's where it happens, is taking those wonderful risks. And so I'm going to leave you with this. We have all kinds of technologies that will tell you what kind of person you are, what kind of person you can be in a company or elsewhere. We do that, you create it. But for the sake of our own humanity and for the sake of you and for the sake of our industry, fuck up. Thank you.
Monique Morrow! Thank you so much. Monique Morrow, stay for a little while, please. Monique, if you could turn back the wheel of time, just to the moment before you signed the Cisco contract, would you, in retrospect, still sign? So, did it help the experience you've made, or wouldn't you like to go through that again?
It helped. It really did. I mean, you remember, this was the most valued company in the world, and I would have signed it either way. That's the risk that it takes. I would not have. It's true. It didn't feel good at the time, but having all of the people around you go away and say goodbye in one swoop of 8,000 emails. But I can tell you this, that it was really enriching. I've got people here I would never, ever have met otherwise. So, yeah. I mean, it's easier to say hindsight is 20/20, but you know what? You're zigzagging all the way, and that's the learning.
And for all in the hall here, we have the opportunity to go back into questions just right in the end. So send your questions with the hashtag Fuckup Zurich. We're pleased about that. Just feel free to send whatever question there is. My final questions to you would be, if you compare the mentality of the Silicon Valians and you compare them to people you've met in Switzerland, what's the major difference?
I think in Switzerland we identify a lot too much with our work sometimes because it's very close. I think though, however, having said that, we have a chance to change that and create the new heroes that we see on the stage today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Monique Morrow! I look at Cherry and she goes like this. That's a good sign. Now, our second speaker tonight, he is president of the ETH. In 2011, he won the Golden Owl, the Golden Eule for excellent teaching. And it's just a pity that I didn't attend the class of his yet. So, he never dreamt of making any sort of career in academia when he was a boy. His research goal is creating zero-emission cars, and if you look to the left on the stage, you see something that I'd consider really weird. Tullino Puzzella, this is a pneumatic hybrid engine, and I'm very curious to learn a bit more about that, so give a big round of applause for the one and only President of ETH, Mr. Lino Bucella.
Hello everybody. When Greg and Jerry came and asked me if I want to be part of this event, I spoke with my media people, I spoke with my colleagues, I spoke with my wife, and they all gave me a very clear message: no F way. And then I looked up, what is this Entrepreneurs Club doing? What are these young people standing for? And I must tell you, I'm extremely proud of the ETH Entrepreneur Club. I think what you guys are doing is exactly what I want all of ETH students to do, to be creative, critical thinkers with an entrepreneurial spirit, and I would like to compliment you for that. And for that reason I said yes. I'm not going to tell you about my life as a president. As Monique said before, we have micro careers, we have several lives. I had several lives. I'm going to tell you about my life as an engineer. I'm very proud to be an engineer. I think this is one of the most noble causes of humanity. I'm going to tell you a little bit where I'm coming from, and I'm going to tell you a little bit why I really believe that this is one of the most noble causes. This is where my family comes from. You won't know this, of course, but you will know the product of that region, which is Prosecco. So whenever you drink a glass of Prosecco, you drink maybe a little bit of, I have several family members still who produce that wine, of a little bit of Cuzzella. It's just on the other side of the Alps where my father grew up, immigrated after World War II, so I'm what they call here a secondo. I was born in Switzerland as the second generation. I grew up with this sound calling me. I was born with this sound calling me. October 4, 1957, the Russians launched the first human-made satellite into orbit. This ball here, the Sputnik, and it did nothing else than sending this signal. But that signal scared the hell out of many, many people. This was a sign that Russia was this was the Cold War times. Of course, most of you won't remember that. I was part of it, at least the end of it. This scared many people. For instance, this person here, he didn't tweet at that time, the President of the United States. He made announcements to the Congress, I said, and said to put the man onto the moon before the end of this decade. And so one of the first fuck-ups of my life was as Fabian, I applied to ESA to become, you want to become a jet fighter?
Yes.
I wanted to become an astronaut. So I applied to ESA and I passed the first exam, so I did better than you did. But I failed on the second one, on the physical mate, essentially. So, you see, that's life. You move on, you become an engineer. Now, I want to tell you why I became an engineer, and these two people here, or these two figures, these two heads here shown, are for me fundamental. On the left, of course, on your left, right, Aristotle, for 2,000 years, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, when people wanted to study nature, wanted to understand how this world is built, what did they do? Did they go out into nature? Did they look for themselves? Did they pose critical questions? No. They read what Aristotle had written. He had written very weird things. For instance, that heavy things fall faster than light things, or that ice swims underwater because it's flat, or the funniest of all, he wrote that women have fewer teeth than men. No kidding you. And people didn't open the mouths of their wives, they just read what Aristotle had written. Nah? This guy, of course, was a great philosopher, I don't want to debate that, but this guy stopped for 2,000 years the human development. I always say if he had if we hadn't had Aristotle as a much earlier, this small little Italian, this is my hero by the way, of course, as you might have noticed by now, this small little Italian Galileo Galilei who questioned everything. Of course, the Catholic Church was at that time the great authority. He didn't believe in authorities. He posed critical questions, he was creative in coming up with answers, and he tried to be an entrepreneur. Believe me, he tried to be. He was clever enough that when they showed him the torture things, that he said, okay, if you want that the earth in the middle of it, I believe, let it be. But then he walked out of the room and said, e pur si muove. At the end he was really stubborn. This person, Galileo Galilei, is for me the hero because he posed questions. He didn't believe authorities, and he tried to understand by himself. So don't believe, think. That's the main message of the night. Don't believe what I'm telling you. Everything must be criticized, everything must be questioned. Only by that we can have progress in humanity. This is my second hero, probably the better physicist than Galileo Galilei. Feynman, Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize, quantum electrodynamics, many things, but that's not the important point here. He said this beautiful quotation here that I'm sure you have read by now. This is for me one of the life signs why I believe that we must be all a little bit engineers. Why? What is this Rogers Commission? This is one of the biggest fuck-ups that I know of and one of the most tragic fuck-ups because it could have been avoided. The Challenger catastrophe, you remember, or maybe you have read about it. Space Shuttle Challenger, 1986, exploded during lift, start, 2-3 minutes after start. What had happened? I have to tell you that story. NASA at that time was in deep financial troubles. So Congress wanted to cut the budget. There was a big pressure from politics. The days of Kennedy were way over. There was no reason anymore to fight this war. So NASA needed urgently a PR coup. What was the PR coup? They put a woman, Krista McAuliffe, I think was her name, who was a teacher, primary school teacher on that space shuttle. And the intention was that this Krista McAuliffe would give classes from space. Can you imagine that headline, huh? We have history from space, we have English from space. It was on purpose, so they needed urgently this PR coup. Unfortunately, it was January, February, and even in Florida it can become cold. You see here a picture, and the problem at that time was that these Feststoffraketen, these fixed fuel engines here, they were delivered in 3 pieces. 1, this is the sealing here, 2, 3. And to put them together and to make sure that the hot gases don't come up, they used sealing rings, O-rings. These are rubber rings. And you know, of course, very well, if it's cold, rubber gets brittle. And if a sealing ring is brittle, it doesn't work anymore. And so what happened? During liftoff, there was a small piece somewhere, a small hole, small leak, and hot gases started to flow through. And once hot gases flew through a ribbon, of course, they destroyed the ribbon. And what happened is that this whole system here, the whole space shuttle, with 6, 7, 8 people on board, and among them this Krista McAuliffe, exploded in front of the eye of the world. This was anything but a PR coup. It was a negative show for NASA. They stopped the shuttle program. It was a really big problem. And why did it happen? Because management didn't believe what engineers were telling them. Engineers had warned them, it's too cold. The O-rings, the sealings will not be sufficiently working. You will have a problem. Don't start the space shuttle. Management said, no, we need to start it because we need this money. We need this coup. So again, don't believe in authorities, don't believe in bosses, be critical, question them, and come up with your own solutions. If you do that, you might end up with these students here, a long time ago. These are students of mine when I was a professor at ETH. They won the world record in economic driving. Fuel economy driving, they drove with the energy of 1 liter of gasoline 5,385 kilometers. At that time, the world record, and you see how they celebrated. That is fun, and this has driven me all of my life. Dani, jetzt können wir langsam vorstellen, die Maschine. What you see here is a classical engine, as you would buy it today, 4 cylinders, the air comes in here, it burns with the fuel, this is the fuel line, and then the exhaust gases are pushed out of the engine so that you have a cleaner air, you have a catalyst here working. Now, most of the time, 1 cylinder would be sufficient. Only when you run full speed at full load, you need all the 4 cylinders. And the key problem with that is that if you run this engine on the load of only one cylinder, it's very, very inefficient. So you consume a lot of fuel without doing a lot of useful things. So our idea of the team that we had at that time was, why not cut this engine in two? Let's get rid of 2 cylinders and make a 2-cylinder engine. In case you really need the power, let's use a pump or a turbocharger that pushes extra air in it, and then you can put extra fuel in. And to drive this pump, we use the energy that has not been used in the cylinders to drive a turbine here that then drives the compressor on this side. This is a turbocharged engine used in many applications. What is the problem with this turbocharged engine? I'll show it on the next slide here. If this is time, and driver steps on the pedal and wants acceleration or torque for the engineers in you, then a turbocharged engine responds and then has this huge turbo lag. So it takes 3-4 seconds if you make a very fuel-efficient engine until the turbocharger is up there. This is unacceptable. Nobody will want to drive a car like that. So what we did is, we used an additional air tank that at the desired moment will put in extra air on a very rapid boost, air boost, so that this engine would react much quicker than any other engine that you can think of. A company with which we worked together produced a prototype car that you see here, and with this prototype car, the same car was driven with several engines, and of course you can bet our engine here, the one that you see there on the stage, this was the one with the fastest reaction time. It's like a super duper fast car, faster than anything else that you can have. We spent 3-4 PhD doctoral theses. We spent a lot of money. You see here one of the prototypes. I will be there in the opera hall later, and my people here, by the way, Danny Wagner, Norbert Zieger, and Richard Hutter, 3 people from my former lab. They have brought in this thing. They can explain in much more detail how this works, and it's a good lesson in mechanical engineering anyway, so use that. You can't buy that. It works, you can't buy that. So big time, fuck up again. What happened? I don't know. One thing for sure is timing. Maybe we were too late. So one recommendation I might give you, do the right things, yes, but do it on the right time. If you do the right things too early or too late, they might be useless. So it's very important to get the right timing. We were maybe off this rhythm. The second is market. Do never forget that you might have the most brilliant idea that you can think of, the most clever realization, but at the end of the day, if nobody wants what you make, it's not going to work. So before you start doing something, think of the potential customers. And by customers, I don't mean the simple plain vanilla customers that pay you 5 Swiss francs for an ice cream. I mean your intended audience. What is the people that are listening to my talk, what do they expect from me? This was my customer attitude that I had when I prepared this talk. So always think of the other people. This is important. If you do something only for your own, most probably, it will just fail. And the most important recommendation I can give you is this. Be lucky. Thank you very much.
Now, it seems that you are top-notch in engines, that you're very fascinated by engines. I think what we all would like to know, what kind of a car do you drive?
I have always refrained from naming the brand, but I've always told what type of cars. It's large, I have a family, I like to do some outside sports, car, van, nicht ein Van, wie sagen wir auf Deutsch? Kombi. No, the ugly ones. It is a 4-cylinder, 2-liter, 190 horsepower, and I lock my consumption. So far I have 5.4 liters per 100 kilometers, and I've driven some 20,000 kilometers.
Oh wow. And what do you say about electrical cars? Like, I don't mention the brand name, like the one from California.
The ones who have promised making them?
Probably yes.
Yes, okay, then we're on the same page. Electric cars can have an important role particularly if the range is limited, if you don't want to go far away, if you don't want to have higher speeds and higher load capacity. This is the question people always ask me, and by the way, this question has been asked to me 20 years ago, and I gave the same answer. Electric cars have a limited spectrum. In this spectrum, they make a lot of sense. In future, we will have more of everything. The mobility spectrum will be much more broader.
In a sense, there's space for diesel motors, there is sense for, as we say, Benzinmotoren, for hybrid engines, we'll have everything.
Natural gas, we will also have much more a combination of public transportation and individual transportation, so that the two systems mix back. Let's make a little bit of publicity. ETH started a mobility center recently, where we do a lot of research on that topic, and I would like to have many more students fascinated in that subject, and those, of course, many more sponsors who fund it.
And many more will follow. Mr. Lino Puzzella! And I think there might be many more questions. Send your questions to hashtag Fuckup Zurich. And by the way, there is a balcony. How are you doing on a balcony? Oh, that's amazing. Now we come to our third speaker this evening. It's Jeremy Abbott. Jeremy Abbott is a creative evangelist, very mystical word, creative evangelist. He used to work for Google, and he helps us out finding our career path. Now, he draws 3 different approaches on finding our proper career path, and we are very curious to learn more about it. Big round of applause for Mr. Jeremy Abbott.
Wow, it's pretty bright up here. So every day I live with this idea of fuck-ups, and it's not just because we elected Trump and I'm American, but it's because I live in Hamburg and I speak German, but I never learned German academically. So I don't speak Schweizerdeutsch, or however you say it. I speak German, and I kind of learned it from the street. So I kind of mess up the Z and do, and should we duzen or should we, whatever, I messed that up. So I'm always outside my comfort zone when I speak German, and I live in Germany, so it's quite often. That being said, this is the title here, Break the Rules. And there's this great quote from MacArthur, and it says, "You're remembered for the rules that you break," or something like that. And I think that's true. I think the people that we admire, and the people that we hold high to some degree, with the exception of Trump, they are breaking the rules. You know, they're doing things that we don't really think about because they've done something outside the lines. And I think that's really important. The irony of it is, here being here in Switzerland and talking about failure is, I cannot imagine a more perfect place in the world than Switzerland. And I think that's ironic. And just being here and hearing the politicians saying "fuck up" in public is worthwhile. So that was nice as well. So let me just show you this thing. I was in Bern this past year, and it's an amazing place. I guess it's your capital, right? And look how it's like perfect, right? I mean, this is the stuff of Bilderbuch. Now this is the stuff of people's dreams in the U.S. And so this is what we call, this is a reverse droney. So you guys know what a selfie is, right, with a camera? But I have a drone, so I take dronies. It's a drone. So this is a reverse droney. And this is me kind of looking, oh wow. Thing about flying drones right now is it's kind of a gray area. It's kind of like when people smoke stuff and they don't really know if it's legal or not. It's kind of gray. So I don't do the smoking, but I fly drones and I follow the laws, but I always fly off-peak times. That's the best time to get the light, is off-peak. So that being said, Monique mentioned this as well, but I think it's really important for every individual to have a mission. And this is my mission here. And I believe creativity is the thing that's going to separate us from machines. And of course we know now that AI can create music and it draws and it does stuff, but inherently creativity for me is connecting with people and creating things that were never done before. And I think we can program that to some degree, but at the moment, humans are the only things that can be creative. So there's 3 things I want to talk about today. And this first thing is something that we can all relate to as children, because this is how we live and this is how we grow being children. We ask questions like, why is the sky blue? Why do you have to go to Zurich today? Why aren't you home? Whatever it might be. And these questions move us forward. So let me ask you a question theoretically. When was the last time you were too afraid to ask a question because you felt somehow a little bit of hemming, a little bit of a fear of asking that question? And I think all of us have been there. All of us are interested in asking a question, but I think our culture is it's actually designed so we don't ask questions. Because at one point, you've probably asked a question, and that teacher or that adult or whoever said, that's such a stupid question. So you feel like, oh no, I can't really ask questions anymore. So I think, we have to move beyond this idea of being afraid of asking questions. And that's what really great entrepreneurs do, really great innovators do. They really ask the questions. So this is a really old photo of me in college. And I think some of you are students, and some of you might act still like students. And although I'm not a student, I feel like the world is a school. It's a place to learn. So if you look at my Lebenslauf, my CV, it does kind of feel like I'm still taking a bunch of classes. Because I'm not the kind of guy that stays at a place for 10 years. I think the longest I've been has been 4 years. And that's my first agency, my first startup. And then previously at Google, I stayed there for 4 years, which was quite long for me. And for me, it was always about asking the questions. Is this something I'm interested in? And I think that's something Monique also touched on. In the future, we're not going to have jobs for 10, 20 years. You're not going to retire somewhere. We talk about the gig economy, and if you're a little bit younger, you know what that's going to come to you. This idea of gig economy is going to happen. So you have to inherently understand what you're interested in, and then just seek that out. Number 2, it's really important to understand that it might be cool to work at a company like Google or whoever it might be, or Facebook or something. But in general, it's who you work with that's important, not so much the brand. The brand is just secondary. And I would recommend checking out companies like Google because they have free food and all this cool stuff. But if you're really interested in doing what you want to do and you have a mission, then you'll inherently understand Google or Facebook or whoever might not be the best place. That being said, I think my best advice for those of you that are looking for a job and those of you that are giving jobs is understand inherently who your manager is. If you interview somewhere and you don't meet your manager, then that's a huge, huge problem. Because in the end, work is where we spend the majority of our time. And if you can't get along with the people that you work with, then you might as well not go to work. Here, this was my second job. I started this agency, the startup, in 1996. So I was pretty young. And this article is from a magazine called Stern. This was in 1998, and we had like 14 people. And it was pretty exciting, and what we did is basically I'm a designer by trade, and I learned design. And to the former speaker, I find engineering is to machines as design is to people. So if you're interested in that market fit and what people want, then have a designer on the team. That being said, what we used to do is experiment a lot. So we would build prototypes and then sell them to clients like Lufthansa or Daimler or whatever. But also we used to make a bunch of games, just ideas that we felt touched upon us. And I think the biggest fuck up that we had at the time, we were quite popular at the time, was this thing that you can barely see here, Princess Diana Tunnel Racer. And as you can imagine, this was in 1998. And in Germany at the time, the A-Klasse, the A-Class, just came out. You guys probably don't remember this, but some of you do. And they had this thing called the Elk-Test, so it has to go around some curves. And the A-Class at the time failed, so it tipped over. And then at the same time, there was a tragedy with Princess Diana. So what we did is, since we played with media, we created this little game where you had to go through a tunnel with the A-Class, which was very untastefully done, of course. It was a huge fuck up, but it got tons of press, like Face magazine, and some of you might know Face, and then some like grandma wrote us from somewhere, and it was very distasteful, but it was a trying time, and that was a huge fuck up. And it wasn't done for PR's sake, it was more done for the sake that we thought media is just too much and we wanted to play with this idea of media. So the last thing is number 3, and I think this is really, really key. So if you work somewhere and you find that you only have a budget, a certain, like, I don't know, whatever, my 500 euros or 600 euros or 600 Swiss francs to actually learn, then I would try to leave that company as soon as possible. Because if a company cannot integrate learning into the day-to-day, then they're going to fail very quickly. And why is that happening? Because right now, if you think about when we go online and do things, we're actually training the machines for us. And the machines, in some cases, are learning quicker than us. And this is almost the downfall, stuff like this, is the downfall of learning, in my opinion. Because we are actually learning less while we're training the machines to learn more. And that's kind of a scary concept, to think at some point the machines are going to be learning more than we are. So my point here is, if you're not learning all the time, just like you do if you think back or if you're in school now, how much you learn every day, if that's not happening at work, then you're going to fail miserably. And there's this great quote, or this great thing, actually it's not so great, it's kind of a fuck up actually, but it's from Nokia, and the last CEO from Nokia, he said, you know, we did everything right and we hit all our numbers, but in the end we still failed. And they failed for a couple of reasons. Number one, I would say they didn't think big enough. They didn't think that Apple, at the time, known as Apple Computer, could come over and create a phone that would change the world, basically. And number two, the idea that learning was not built into the culture. I would argue that that company had no learning built into the culture. In any company, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you're not learning all the time, then you're gonna fuck up, basically. So, this is kind of the takeaway. So failures, yes, failures really suck, and nobody likes to fail, whether it's a personal relationship or work, whatever. And it's something we kind of, in the entrepreneur world, talk about, failures being great, but failures really do suck. But if you take that and flip that around to saying, okay, it's not a failure, it's a learning, then I think you'll move a little further. Because really, that's what it's really about. It's about progress. And that's what you can do in today's world when you go to university or you play video games like Fortnite or whatever. You try things out, you fail a bit, but you keep trying. And I think that's the important thing, because it's really about progress and the learning you take from the failure. So this is my last slide, and this is basically what it's really about for me. It's not about the answers, because today you can get answers anywhere. You can ask Alexa for answers, you can type in at the Google search box for answers. Answers are everywhere. What's important for us, like Galileo said, is it's really about the questions, and the questions that move us forward. So here's my last drone shot from my trip in Dan. So just one thought to leave with you. We're in Switzerland, the most perfect place, but sometimes you have to look beyond the perfection to really understand where things are going. You have to think about what is the fuck up and what is the learn. Thank you very much.
Jeremy Abbott, thank you so much. Please join me on stage. Jeremy Abbott. Now, thank you so much for that presentation. Now, Jeremy, you encouraged us all to ask questions. And let me ask you one question. What exactly is a creative evangelist?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, there was something on Wikipedia recently. You can search for it, but it's not there because they deleted it. And one of the things was, what is the relevance of creative evangelist? It was translating Google, whatever. But basically, the idea, I was at Google almost 6 years ago, and the idea is basically, if you think about tech and Google, it's really about the answers. And you think of, in general, I think a lot of people think creativity has to do with artists and making things and painting and stuff, but I think tech can be very creative. So my whole goal was, how do you get people excited about tech and what you can do with tech? So I would do things that would have to do with working with APIs, which is tech speak for kind of just getting in there without having to code, and doing other things. So it was basically making stuff that, that was questioning what you could do on the platform of Google.
So basically making stuff that would bring you into prison in Russia.
No, that's happening anyway, because we have Snowden, and he's in, if Russia's a prison, then I guess that's what, yeah. But no, basically it was like, I'll give you an example. So before I got to Google, they asked me to create a few projects for an event they had. And one of the projects was, the backstory is I have 2 kids, and there was a limited amount of screen time, how much time they could look at the screen. And since I traveled a lot, They wanted to know where I was. So the idea and what we created was, if you think about, let's say this is our dining room table at home, and this is a lamp, right? So when I was at home, the lamp was low to the table by default. And the further away I would go from home, it would go higher and higher. So my kids have a feeling of how far away I am from home. And then it would rotate like a compass in the direction I would be. So it would be kind of like that stuff. It'd be like questioning, the question there was, do you need to look at a screen to understand the physicality of someone?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Jeremy Abbott. Send us some more questions to Jeremy Abbott, hashtag Fuckup Zurich, and we have our fourth speaker to come. He was head of human resources, Personalchef, as we call it in German, for Swissair. At the time, Swissair went into the grounding. And for those who don't know anymore what Swissair is, bloody big aviation company, lots of heritage in their tradition. Everyone in Switzerland was pride on it, at least I think so. And there were some rumors about the company, so it became legendary that Swissair at their max had 5 747 aircraft, I think. And the captains of those aircraft believed that they're sort of a very special breed of people, and they, instead of wearing 4 noodles, wanted to have 5 noodles on their shoulders. Now today, Matthias Möllene, he is head of the Center of HR and Leadership at HWZ, and he, surprisingly, even became a film star. And we're having a quick look at that sequence.
Da ist keine Kerosin mehr. Kreditkarten von meinen Leuten sind alle gesperrt. Der geht in die Gewerkschaft, müssen wir... Zahlen vergibt euch keine Kerosin mehr. Kreditkarten von meinen Leuten sind alle gesperrt. Der geht in die Gewerkschaft, müssen wissen, wie viele Stellen wir noch abbauen. Herr Gott, die können wir die Oktoberlöhne überhaupt noch zahlen.
Bitte, eins nach dem anderen. Ich bin dran, jeden Investor von Alaska bis Zermatt anzukommen. Und wenn nötig, auch auf der Fleu. Unserem Ex-Nationalrat haben wir jetzt eine Gruppe gebildet, die uns bis in 2 Wochen die nötigen Kapitalien verschaffen soll. Und das Geld für die nächsten 2 Wochen werde ich auftreten. Ich verspreche, wir bleiben in der Luft.
Now, we featured Matthias Möllene in there, and for those of you who haven't discovered him, we do a little rewind of the same sequence, letting me show you him in person. There we go. There he is. There he is. There he is. And all in the background, we see his hair. There it is. I think that's it.
Und wenn nötig, auch auf der Fleu.
And we give a big round of applause for the one and only Matthias Möllene.
Cool music. MC Hammer. Yeah, but this is not only a fun story tonight, but let me start with this, which was kind of fun, but in June 2016 I met an officer from the Swiss Federal Customs Administration. He actually knocked on the door of our neighbor company, so I have my own little company in an old factory building in Worcester, where a lot of little startups and SMEs are having their businesses. So he knocked on the door of our neighbor because this is a company which imports sake, Japanese rice wine, and he wanted to control whether they had followed all the rules of importing alcohol from abroad. But nobody from the company was there, so he was looking around and asked me, do you know where the people are? I said, they're not here today, but why don't you come in for a coffee? Now, it's always good to make friends with customs officers. That's why I invited him, and after a while he said to me, you know, I know you very well. I said, oh, this is embarrassing because I think I have never seen you before. He said, yeah, that's true. So, okay, and the explanation, and he said, a couple of years ago, around the time of the Swiss Air grounding, I used to be an officer of the city police in Uster. And since you got police protection for a couple of months, I was your personal bodyguard. So I said to him, I think I don't want to know what you know about me. It was crazy days in October 2001. Swiss went bankrupt, and I had been responsible for the handling of the mass dismissals. 35,000 people lost their jobs. I was trying very hard to handle this as fairly and humane and adequately as I possibly could. But before we look more in detail about what happened then, let's take a look at when the journey began. I grew up in Fulda, right in the middle of Germany, and since I was 12, it was clear that I would become a pilot. I started that way because close to Fulda there's a mountain called Wasserkuppe, and this is a mountain where glider flying has been invented. After the First World War, when the Germans were not allowed to fly aircraft with engines, they invented aircraft without engines. So it's a glider flying was invented. I started to become a glider pilot, and when I was 18, I received my glider pilot's degree. But I thought that would be a start of a wonderful pilot's career, but I fucked it up. Before I entered this lovely aircraft, because I failed the eye test at Lufthansa, so I was not allowed to start a career as a pilot. But I was lucky. The second application with Lufthansa to become a Luftverkehrskaufmann, an air traffic airline manager career, was successful, and so I was given the chance to start there. After the apprenticeship, I spent almost 16 years in Lufthansa in various positions, starting as a sales rep at the airport of Düsseldorf, so at the very bottom of the career ladder. And then I moved up to the top, so 16 years, a long time. You spent maximum 4 years, so I did it 4 times longer. So I was there 16 years, and I did a lot of things in HR, because I was then taken to HR on a maternity leave. Interesting thing. You know, very, very long time ago, already in Germany, young mothers had the chance to stay home for 18 months, and with a guarantee that the workplace she left was kept for her unchanged until she retired, and so they put me there for the 18 months maternity replacement, which was for me the maximum. I thought I could stand in HR, because after the apprenticeship we had 2 sheets of paper. On the first sheet you could write, what do you want to do after the apprenticeship in Lufthansa? On the second sheet, what you not want to do after the apprenticeship. On the second sheet I wrote bookkeeping and HR. And then they swapped the sheets of paper. And the mother didn't return, so they kept me. And had a lot of interesting jobs in management development and HR. I was a member of the recovery team. Lufthansa went almost bankrupt in the early 90s after the Gulf Wars. And so a lot of interesting jobs I had. But the most important step in my airline career came after this. In 1998, I moved to Swiss Air. So this is one of the jumbos that Fabian just mentioned. I never thought about the 5-star captains, but I'll ask them, because a lot of them are still my friends, although I fired them. The first 4 months working for Swiss Air were wonderful, really wonderful. You know, because when you're an executive for Lufthansa and you're invited privately to a party, then you hope that nobody takes a small talk on Lufthansa or airline or aviation or something, because then all the complaints come. So they fucked it up with coffee on my jeans, they lost my bag, they were unfriendly at check-in. You know all these stories? And when I came to Swiss Air, it was the opposite. When I was invited, they always said, you know, when I see the Swiss cross on one of those aircraft, I feel at home. It's wonderful. You're doing a great job. It was always applause. It was always positive. And I was thinking and asking them, did you never ever had a negative experience with Swiss Air? I said, no. Did they never lost your bag? Sure they did, but I have so many bags, I don't care. But these were the 4 months when I started at Swiss Air. Then on September 2nd in 1998, 229 passengers and crew members lost their lives on board of this aircraft, close to the Canadian coast at Halifax. And so this is definitely the worst experience you can make as an airline manager. And independently from this tragic event, which is still in the memories of many, many people here, the next challenge followed at a strategic level. Swiss Air Group, the mother company, the holding company, tried to pursue an aggressive growth strategy in Europe by acquiring minority stakes in smaller airlines. You could say also not so brilliant airlines, but they tried to make it good, but they failed. So actually, then in 2001, the board had to realize that the strategy failed, so they fucked it up. And they had to do a turnaround, a complete turnaround, get rid of all the strategic alliances, and they fired the CEO, brought in a new one. You saw him, Mario Corti on the screen, the actor who played Mario Corti, but he looked very similar. So they brought in Mario and told Mario, you have to do a turnaround strategy and make everything different. So make it successful again. And Corti and his team, so we presented the strategy how to turn around Swiss Air and the Swiss Air Group on August 31st in 2001, which sounded reasonable, the strategy. At least the analysts, the people, the professionals, and our colleagues, all they believed in the strategy, but finally, 11 days later, on September 11th, we had the terrorist attacks in New York, where all the airlines in the world lost 80% of their value for a couple of weeks or months. And this is not a problem, it's a bookkeeping problem. You have a problem in your balance sheet, but if you have to sell assets in order to free up cash to sell these subsidiaries, then you are in deep trouble. And so that's basically on October 2nd, 2001, Swiss Air Group had to declare bankruptcy, and Swiss Air had to stop operation and ground the entire fleet. Around 35,000 people, as mentioned, lost their jobs and had to be dismissed. As a member of the Swiss Air executive management, I personally received death threats in the beginning, which the police took seriously. That's when the police officer who I introduced a few minutes ago came into play. My family suffered a lot during these very stressful days. My wonderful wife and my son are not able to come tonight, but my daughter is here, sitting in the front row. For her, it's a special day because on October 2nd, when we had the grounding, it was her 16th birthday. So really bad memory on the 16th birthday. Sweet little 16, looks different. My personal attention was focused on helping our employees who lost their jobs, and in particular those with a lower qualification. And what happened was, sitting on my desk, I received a letter handwritten, obviously written by an elderly lady, and she wrote me, "I feel so sorry that you have to dismiss so many people, and I would like to contribute something." And she sent me a 100 Swiss franc bill. So, and I received not only one letter, but 3 or 4, and I ended up with 370 Swiss francs in cash for 35,000 dismissals. So what to do with the money? And here's a story now which I never told to the media, and if somebody from the media is here, don't listen, because it's not for the public, but it's just for you. What I thought about is, if there are people who are ready to pay money to help these poor people who just lost their jobs, we could do something professional with it. So I started to collect money, not sitting at the train station with the hat, but I told everybody I knew, I collect money. So if you're ready to pay, give me money to spend for the hardship cases, I will take it. And I will make sure that we distribute it fairly. I've teamed up with the head of the Office for Economy and Labour, is the official English title, the Office for Economy and Labour, the AVA of the Canton of Zurich, and the leader of a union. And we built a foundation. I collected the money and we distributed among the hardships. And guess how much money I got? Just private money. 4 million Swiss francs. So that was really... So in March 2002, that was always quoted in the media, this is the guy who fired himself. Of course I had to terminate my contract, or we had to terminate it, but we did it with style, of course. So I terminated the contract of my deputy. So I'm sorry to tell you, I have to dismiss you. And he said, and so do I. So that's when we left. So here's my own dismissal. Here are the 3 most important learnings for tonight. Learning number 1, be prepared for the unexpected. Always. Nobody ever thought Swissair may go under anywhere, at no time, under no circumstances, but it did. So be prepared. Doesn't mean be anxious, but calculate the uncalculable things. Be prepared, always. Second learning, focus on psychological safety. This is an interesting learning we received from Google. Google last year did an interesting research called the Project Aristotle. It was a project was called Aristotle, so they hadn't listened to this your speech before, so they thought this is a good guy. And what they tried to figure out what the difference is between high-performing teams and not so high-performing teams. And it was not the qualification of the people. It was not the experience. It was not the percentage of female workers in the team. It was not the percentage of foreigners, people from overseas. The number 1 reason for the difference in performance was psychological safety. This is what I would like to ask you. In order to be prepared, focus on respect, trust, and appreciation. Those 3 things make great companies like Google successful. It could be your startup as well. Don't forget these 3 magic words. And the learning number 3, the final one, if you don't understand, if you have doubts, if you know more, if you see opportunities, if you see a lack of humanity, if you're prepared to contribute, speak up, but do it politely. But do it. Thank you very much for listening.
Not just interesting, especially the second last point, psychological safety. How can we test for psychological safety?
Do you feel respected?
Not always.
Too bad.
Yes.
Do you feel trusted? Or do you trust other people?
Not my bank. But
You're in deep trouble.
Yes, I am.
Maybe we can help you.
I will join. I'll try to at least.
Yeah.
Now, that story about the grounding, laying off 35,000 people, that's breathtaking. That's very intense, especially from an emotional standpoint. Could you sleep the night after the grounding?
Yes, I could, but this is a personal luck. You know, I'm lucky. I can sleep everywhere. I can sleep in a plane. You know, when I go on a flight to Vienna or so, I typically I'm not awake during takeoff.
You sleep already during takeoff?
I sit down and sleep. So my problem is when I sit at an aisle seat, you know, I have long legs, so when my knee comes out and they come with a trolley, typically they destroy my knee. So they wake me up the hard way. But until then I sleep. Yeah.
Okay, and this is not because of a speech of Mr. Schneider-Ammann?
No, I don't know him personally yet.
Yeah, I've met him and he is a really nice guy. So cool. I take everything back. Now, please feel free to send us your questions, #Fuckup Zurich. I beg you to remain on stage and give another big round of applause for Mr. Martin. To invite all our 4 speakers to come back on stage. So please, Monique Morrow, big applause. Jeremy Abbott, big round of applause. And Lilo Pizzella. We could already collect some questions, and there's a wizard who brings them on stage. Please, Greg, join me with the miraculous questions. Thank you so much. And you see, it's upside down. This doesn't matter because we are allowed to fuck up. There comes the first question goes to Jeremy. How do you find the right people to work and, let's say, fuck up with?
I mean, this Project Aristotle, that's a point. I think to find the right people, you have to find people you respect and people you trust. And maybe you don't find that right. It's just like a date, right? You go out with a date and you might like that person, but maybe you don't trust them at first, and maybe you don't respect them, but it grows over time. But I think really great companies, they find people through the people that already work there. So they have this thing where if you refer someone, then you get a cash bonus or whatever. But besides that, I think it's really about finding the people that you respect and people you trust. That's how you find great people.
Thank you so much. We have a question to Lino. It's from Jasmine. What was your actual fuck up, Mr. Gutzella?
I didn't manage to explain it so well that people realized, or at least all. The whole damn thing down there cost at least $1 million Swiss francs, at least. And it has led nowhere. Is this sufficient?
That's okay. Our next question comes from Julia, and it goes to Matthias. Matthias, would you have preferred becoming a pilot and being among the pilots laid off?
Yeah, so no, I don't think so, you know, because I know many pilots.
And you know the contract of them?
I know the contract, but I don't want to step on their toes, but for me it would be kind of boring. The job as a pilot, you know, it's a very interesting job, but you know, in a managerial fashion and having to deal with so many different people, diversity things, it's much more important. And the other thing is, if you're a pilot, you have to sit in a cockpit, a very small cockpit, with another person. And you have to do small talk with this guy for 12 hours. And I'm not a great small talker.
Yeah. Imagine this being the wife. So in fact, you're happy with the career choice still?
Happy, yeah, I'm happy.
Thank you so much, Matthias. Thank you so much, Julia. Here comes a question for Monique. It's from Darnia. Did you experience that as a woman, you are judged more harshly for a failure than a man for the similar failure?
Oh, I better think about this response very, very carefully. They want to hear yes. Well, here's the thing. Let me just say, I never thought about it from a gender perspective because it's all about trying to solve a problem together, and technology has no agency. Having said that, there are issues today that we're still talking about, which we shouldn't be talking about, which is why we can't get more women in tech, why we can't get more female entrepreneurs supported, and why we can't have transparency in these types of discussions. And I strongly believe in the 21st century, we will be successful when we no longer have to talk about these issues anymore. Thanks.
Thank you, Monique. Lino, there's another question for you. It comes from Jan Lucas and is, how do you combine a culture that embraces failure with a culture that seeks perfection?
That's a philosophical question. Yeah, exactly. No. I mean, I would claim that you cannot achieve perfection without having had many failures. So, human progress by evolution. I don't believe in revolution, by the way. I believe much more in evolution, where you take steps that are continuous and probe all possible directions, and when you fail, you know that's not the right way to go, and then you move on. But eventually it takes time. So how do you come from failure to perfection? With a lot of stamina.
Thank you, Lino. Very clear. Jeremy, it became clear listening to you that the right collaborators are key to a company and to personal success as well. So who was it comes from Jérôme, the question, who was your most meaningful collaborator in your career?
It has to be my wife. She's still with me. But, and my life as a career. But I think most successful, I would say it was one of those guys on the photo, David Letterman. We studied together in Wisconsin, and then we created the agency for Concealed Media. But I think the most successful ones are the ones that are the most memorable. And there's multiple, a bunch of people that I find have helped me along the way.
Thank you, Jeremy. And we come to our last question tonight. It's from Jan, and it's for Monique. How do you actually make sure to learn from a failure and not just to shrug it off? And I had to look up shrug it off just to be sort of, you don't care about it.
Oh, well, I don't shrug it off. The thing of it is that failure, as you all have heard, is very painful when it happens. And the thing that you have to recognize is that you go deep here, it's pain. You shout out the window, I'm okay. And in fact, you shout out multiple times, I'm okay. And really the most important thing is not allowing yourself to go down the rabbit hole, right? You know, there's the blue pill and the red pill type of thing, the matrix. Well, you know, pick the pill and it'll work. But the most important thing here is to feel it. And if you don't feel it, then it wasn't really a failure. It's all about the learnings at the end of the day.
Monique Moreau. So, thank you so much for sharing these insightful stories, these personal stories, these failures, these at times maybe difficult moments, maybe embarrassing moments, because you make the event what it is, an event to join, and let's hand the word over to one that was crucial in organizing that night. It's Jerry Gall.
And Fabian, and thank you, the audience, for the questions. Now, I'd like to welcome onto stage my friends and colleague, Leah, Fabian, and Gregory, to hand over a small token of appreciation to our speakers and to Fabian. Sharing an inspiring evening with us. We've come to the end of the evening and we hope to meet many of you outside at the apéro. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you very much.